Hello everybody and welcome. I'm Matt, Senior Client Success Manager here at White House Custom Color, and before we start chatting with Julianne today, I just want to have a couple reminders out there. If you haven't subscribed to the Whcc YouTube, make sure and do that because you're going to get notified of cool events like this coming up that you don't want to miss. Make sure to follow along on Instagram at Whcc Pro, and for any of your product details, go to whcc.com. If you do have questions during the broadcast today, make sure and put them into the chat. If you're watching this on the rewind, put them into the comments and we will do our best to get those questions answered for you. So, thank you so much for being with us today. It's an honor.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, it's our pleasure. So, you have a really interesting title.
Yes.
Can you tell us what your title is, just so everybody knows?
It's a digital imaging evangelist at Adobe.
Wow, evangelist.
Evangelist.
That's a word. I like that.
I like it because I think that, well, my goal is to try to take complex, topics, features, concepts, and translate them and then get the word out so that I can understand what they are. So kind of go from engineering speak to photography speak.
And those are very different speaks.
Sometimes they are, yes. Although I will say we have a lot of photographers who are engineers and work on our products, so they're very much more familiar with photography speak than I am with engineering speak.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, it's good that there's a communication there, absolutely, to make sure everybody understands. So, tell us about your background, Julianne. How did you become an evangelist at Adobe? Like, what led you to this point?
So I started in technical support, actually. So I went to school, I wanted to be a psychologist, and then I realized maybe I didn't, and I've always loved.
How many years in were you?
I graduated.
I graduated.
So
quite a few years.
Quite a few. But then I thought, well, maybe I've always loved photography, and so I thought, well, maybe I'll go back to school for that, and so I did. Got a job at a 1-hour photo studio, and then from there got a job at a medical imaging company, and was taking images off of like Betacam, and then putting them to 4x5 so that they could be backlit for panels for trade shows. Yeah, and then from there was this job at Adobe, and we had been using Photoshop 2.0, and I was like, wow, I can cut, copy, and paste. I'm going to apply for this job in technical support. So I did, and I've been there ever since 92.
That's awesome. Since 92.
It's 92.
Yeah,
great company.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And it's fun when we were talking, and this is going to date me as well. I was telling you my journey with Photoshop started at 4.0 on a G3 Mac that had a 4 gig hard drive.
Oh, yeah.
4.
Painful. It's like you run a filter, you get some coffee.
Right, yeah, exactly. It just, the technology then to now, it's hard to even fathom.
It is.
The changes. The little cards that went in the camera when I was doing it were actually little micro drives. You couldn't squeeze them because you'd break them. Yeah. It's incredible. And for those of you that weren't involved in that time, be very glad.
Yeah. It was interesting. The one benefit I think is that I learned all of this very slowly over time, right? Yeah. So sometimes if you launch a complex application like Photoshop, it can be a little overwhelming, whereas I've learned it in little steps, and most people honestly don't use all of it. I mean, they use like a percentage. It's just that all of our customers use a different percentage, so we have a lot of different features in there.
Right, yeah, and features that are mind-blowing.
Yeah, especially today.
The depth and breadth of everything. So from a personal perspective, because we want to focus on that today, like, who really has inspired you, and where do you get inspiration from for, not only working with Adobe, but in your own personal photography? Like, where does that come from, Julianne?
So I would say primarily, well, it started with my parents. So my dad's an engineer, but he wanted a darkroom, and he learned the zone system, and he printed his own black and whites, and so that I thought was very interesting. My mom does painting and also silk screening, so she needed the darkroom as well. And I think actually between the two of them, so my dad's super technical, my mom less technical, more experimental, but my mom had me thinking in layers when I was a kid, because that's what silkscreen is, right? You put one color down, then you put another one, and putting the two overlapping makes another one. And so I think I had a really great upbringing. And then my dad had a book on Jerry Goldsman. And I was like, this is fascinating that this guy's taking, he had 7 enlargers, and he would take a negative and put one in each one and then figure out the exposure and where to dodge and burn, all analog, which is crazy.
What an art.
I know. Yeah.
That's incredible. It'd be fun to be able to do that. So when we were talking on our Zoom call about the content for today, one of the things that you asked me right away, and I'm sure that a lot of people are going to be like, well, duh, Matt, that's something that you should know. You're like, well, are we talking about AI? Or are we talking about generative AI? And I was like, well, that's a great question. Let's talk about both.
Yeah.
So can you explain the difference for everybody that's watching along, what the difference between AI and generative is?
So very, this is how I define it. So very simply, because people just say, like, they feel, there's a lot of emotions out there right now when someone says AI. But there is an entire continuum of AI, right? So AI can just be, an automation in your email that takes, that spam email and puts it in a different folder. It can be as easy as that. Or it can be, it can get gradually more and more complex. So if you're, say, using Lightroom Classic or something, you're doing a search or a filter, like not filters like running a filter, but filtering something, that can all be AI. Masking and selections can be AI. So in Lightroom Classic or Lightroom or even Camera Raw, if you say, like, I want to select people, and it finds the person in your image and it makes a mask from it. Like, all of that is AI and can be incredibly helpful. Like, automation can be incredibly helpful. And then there's generative AI, right? So all of that other AI so far hasn't actually hallucinated and created new pixels. So even like, if you think like clone stamp tool, that's just taking a part of your image and cloning it. The healing brush, unless you have with the remove tool the generative AI turned on, that's just looking at your image and saying, oh, there's a texture over here that looks similar to a texture over here. I'm going to go ahead and grab this texture, put it over here, and then blend it in. But it's not making up pixels.
Correct.
So the generative AI, I always think of that as, that's when it starts hallucinating pixels and generating content that wasn't there before.
Got it. I like that, hallucinating pixels.
Yeah.
That's
it is, because people think, especially at the beginning, that it was taking, an eye from this person and a nose from this person and lips from that person. No, it's an entire machine learning model that has learned from thousands and thousands and millions of images probably. We train from Adobe stock. That's very important, because at Adobe we want to make sure that we respect creators' rights. And so we are training on photographs, illustrations, videos that we have access to and permission to use. Yeah. Okay. So the generative, I think, is where people really kind of get emotional. All the other stuff is like, don't get rid of my auto masking. Like, that's really beneficial, but generative AI, they get a little.
Yeah, it's a hot topic.
It's a hot topic.
So that's a really good lead-in to this next question. So from your perspective, and for that being an emotional, reaction.
It's going to be more straight photography, and then I do composites, which are completely fictitious. Not generative AI, but I'm compositing multiple images, so that scene and that person or thing was never there to begin with. With my straighter photography, I'm using it to remove things for the most part. So at first I was like, I don't know if I want to use this. I don't know if it's cheating. It's not part of my workflow or my process. But you know what? Then I started looking like, well, okay, I could do this traditionally using some of the other tools like the clone stamp tool or whatever. Or I could do it 5 times as fast using generative AI to remove this bush or this tree, or if you're in nature and you've got this beautiful scene and someone's hat has blown off and you can't access it. I don't have a problem with that. other people will. It'll be a continuum. There'll be a lot of discussions, I'm sure, especially with camera clubs, competitions, how much is too much? If I use the healing brush, is it okay? Or the clone stamp tool, but if I use generative AI, is that different?
Right.
So that's all something that's kind of got to be fleshed out.
Right, and I didn't even think about it from the competitive side of it. I mean, there's hairs that are going to be split multiple times there, to determine what will be submissible and legal and, all the things.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. That's a whole nother conversation that we could have.
Yes,
That's
it
the
is.
competitive
And
side of it.
it's quite an important conversation, especially when you think about the photojournalism that's being done, right? So that's why Adobe's also come out with this content authenticity initiative to try to make sure that people know where the image or what the image, so the goal is, I'm trying to be really brief here, but the goal would be in your camera, it would tag it as, you took this photo, it's a raw file, you bring it into software like Photoshop or Lightroom, it can then track what you do to make sure that you don't use generative AI. You can attach your credentials to it, so I can say, hey, this is my image, and it's in much more...
In business, without the use of these platforms and these efficiencies that are available to you.
Sure, absolutely. It's a continuum, right? So with the generative AI, yes, I believe so. I mean, people have been, their businesses are thriving. It might take them longer to do something, so they might be able to do something more quickly. But at the same time, like with my fine artwork, I did an image recently that is this like giraffe and a warthog in a car speeding across the desert, and the giraffe has this pink scarf. Okay, so I don't own a pink scarf. Certainly I could go out and purchase a pink scarf, and I could lay it out on a white background, and then I could photograph it, and then I could extract it, and then I could put that in my image.
Yep.
Designers have been using stock photography for ages, like for years. They would just go find a pink scarf and do that.
Right.
So I started asking myself, so what is the difference? Like, what's the difference if I photograph this myself and incorporate it? What's the difference between that versus using stock versus using generative AI? So that's going to be a question that artists have to ask themselves. Like, where do they want to fall on that continuum? I had never used stock imagery in my composite work before, so I was like, well, no, it's not right. Yeah. But that might be my process. And now I have used it, and I was like, ooh, that was much faster than going out and purchasing that. I'm creating art, not representing reality with that image. So is that a boundary that you want to cross? I think people have to answer that for themselves.
For sure. And now that door is open for you, it probably creates a whole nother set of imagination that goes with that and what the possibilities are.
It is. So I've used it for ideation quite a bit. Just so that's, instead of just filling a specific area, in Photoshop you can just say generate image and put in a prompt, and it will create things. Now, typically I find I'm more successful because I'm not the best prompter. I'm still learning, but I'll do something small, like just the scarf, or just the car. I won't try to do it all in one, but it returns things that I think, oh, I wouldn't have thought of that. That's interesting. So, and I don't know that that's any different than going to a museum and being influenced by other people's work, because we all are influenced by the things that we see. So I'm not sure that this is any different from that.
Yeah, it's such a cool conversation. I knew this was going to be a lot of fun today, but even that, like, as an artist, if you want to take the longer road home, you can.
Absolutely.
You can do whatever processes and whatever steps you want to make that art feel right to you, but at the same time, you're able to go this route or do a combination. I mean, that it doesn't have to be one or the other.
Right.
Constantly. They're not binary together. You can do whatever you want.
It's one of the reasons that I will look, like Adobe has a site called Behance, where you can show your work and other people can come and look at it, and works in progress, all those things. I really like that site because it's not just photography. So there are illustrators, designers, typographers, video creators, and to me, to be able to look cross-discipline, to see what other people are doing and to get more ideas that way is also quite fascinating and part of my process of where I get my inspiration from.
Yeah. Now I'm going to bounce ahead a little bit in our questions because you just kicked that door wide open for me here. So on our conversation a couple weeks ago, you were talking about how the bar is going to be raised, exponentially with what's possible, and you've been really alluding to that. Like, looking into the future for creativity, for photographers, for artists, for all the people and careers that you mentioned, like, is the curve going to be quite absurd of the growth and the possibilities that are out there?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I don't love technology for technology's sake, but I love learning new technologies to see what they can bring us and how I can incorporate them in my workflow.
Right.
So if we think back, if I think back to when I was in the darkroom, that wasn't that long ago, and you would spend all day just making one print, right? Or
but I actually kind of like the darkroom because that means that I couldn't do anything else. I was stuck there.
That is true. It was nice quiet time,
It was
wasn't it?
very nice quiet time.
Okay, well, I'll take it to exposure then.
Okay.
You could spend hours just trying to get the exposure
Right.
right on your film. And now I've got lost. I totally lost the plot. I don't know where I'm going with that one. But today it's so much quicker. That wasn't the road I was going down. But
yeah.
Tell me again what you were asking.
Well, we were talking about the creative process and how the growth of this and the potential for imagery and creativity.
The bar.
Yes. The bar is just being raised and raised and raised and raised.
Yeah, so today I think a lot, look at your mobile device.
Yeah.
You can make a great photograph on that and not know anything about film curves or
Right.
everything we had to know in the past. So I think that's really exciting because it allows many, many more people to go out there and take photographs and tell stories and express themselves creatively, which they may not have done, in the darkroom or, in the past.
Yeah.
So
It's amazing how that device has become an absolutely necessary piece of our life. I can remember going through the budget years ago and being like, cell phone, I don't need that. I've got a landline, that's fine. And now you wouldn't even consider that, Is there a landline anymore? Like, do those exist? I don't even know. Okay, so you had mentioned the way that you're mostly using generative AI is to remove things, not necessarily add things. So before we get into that, though, I do want to remind everybody, if you do have questions for Julianne, make sure and put them into the chat or into the comments. But I have a question, and it kind of ties into this whole topic. So these beautiful images that are behind us, tell us about those. Are those created? Were they photographed? Like, how did these come to be?
yes, they are photographs.
Okay.
They are traditional photographs made with a digital camera,
Okay.
so not with film, but
Yeah.
they're all aerials. Shot in different locations. Some are in Australia, some are in Iceland. The only one that's not an aerial is the one on the end there. That's the iceberg.
Yeah, they're
But
beautiful.
yeah, so they're taken from a small aircraft or a helicopter with the doors off. So see, that's what it gets back for me to the artist's process. Like, I am afraid to fly, but I love doing this. It is the process. So for me, I wouldn't get the personal satisfaction of typing in a prompt
Yeah.
to create this.
Yeah.
I want the experience. And I think a lot of people want that experience.
Absolutely.
And then, again, it's that continuum. Other people are like, no, I want to go to bed before 2 a.m. I just want to retouch these images for my client and get going. And I'm trying to send 2 kids to college, and I need to make a profit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you had asked earlier, would people who don't use AI, I use it all the time when I'm writing. It's easier to edit something than to try to come up with a blank page. I think it's easier to retouch our images, and whether or not they want to go down that path of creating something brand new, that's up to them.
Yeah, for sure. And to be able to take, amazing images and accent, remove, add, just quickly, and if you wanted to do it the long way, that's great too. It's whatever your artist process is. So I'm going to bump ahead again because I just like bouncing around today just to throw everybody off because that's fun. So in the world of revenue driving businesses, since you kind of brought it up, I think that in the photography world, there's a tie together of the better the image, the better the business, the better the revenue driving, whatever that may be. But we all know that that's not necessarily the case. You know, there's a sales-driven business model of images that aren't as stunning as these that are very, very successful out there. So when you're doing these creative projects and using generative AI to work on them, I don't want people to think that that necessarily is going to make you a bazillionaire. You know?
Yeah. Well, I personally am terrible at sales and marketing, so I am definitely not, you know, I have a hard time selling my own artwork. I think a lot of photographers do, especially, you know, they mean something to me. Yeah. And so if someone else likes them, I'm more the type of person that would just be like, oh, that's great.
Just have these.
You would put that on your wall. That's
this makes me so happy.
Yeah. So I'm just, that's why so many artists, you know, had galleries and other people to help sell, and they have, you know, it's a two-person business maybe, where someone's taking the photos and somebody's selling the photos.
Yes, there are definitely some people that are amazing photographers. I'm like, you should never be in a sales appointment ever, because you will give it all away and you will starve. Okay, so bumping back to our, you know, kind of emotional reaction from photographers, because when something's new, change is hard. New things sometimes can be scary. They are going to be early adopters. You know, I think we called it the bleeding edge when we were on the original call. I can remember, you know, going into digital originally, and it was like the equipment was so expensive and so subpar, you know, and a lot of people didn't survive that change. But for the people that were the early adopters of this and are using it from efficiency, there's some amazing tools out there that are being used, but challenges. You know, you were saying like being able to give the right prompts. Being able to reproduce something. I think you gave an example of creating 50 different images. It's very difficult. So, like, speak to that a little bit, Julianne.
So I think when you're using generative remove, well, there's the legality of it all, right? So when you're using generative remove right now and you're just using it to maybe remove a few things in an image, or maybe you use, maybe you're doing a gallery wrap, and so you want to extend the canvas a little bit and have it fill in. You know, there's going to be questions about, you know, because right now, if I just enter in a prompt and get an image back and don't do anything to it, I believe the courts will not allow me to copyright that. So we're going to have to figure out like how much of your image has to be made by a human versus, you know, using generative AI. How much do you have to manipulate it? How much of a part of the image can be? And that's not up to me, that's up to the court, so they'll have to figure that out. So there's that issue that comes up. I would also say that there's the issue of, you know, the elephant in the room is, where are all of these large learning models? Where are they being trained? What information are they being trained on? So Adobe has the Adobe stock library that has millions of images, and we actually used those images, plus images that are out of copyright, so that maybe too old or whatever, to train our models. So that to me is very important, that we didn't just take everybody's artwork and train our models, because because that would be unfair in my view.
Yes.
There are other issues with bias, for example. So you know, when you're creating these models, what images are you using? What's going in to create the models? Because if you put garbage in there, you're going to get garbage out. You know, we've done so much work. We had, you know, internally in the Adobe, we have internal betas where we can use the products, and we just went in there and just prompted things like, you know, a doctor in a white coat. Well, we didn't want to see 4 of the same doctors. We'd like to see some male doctors, some female doctors, you know, so there could be a lot of bias based on the images that you use to train the models. So people always ask me, you know, like, how can we improve them? And if you see that bias, I would ask you, like, please report it. There's a button right there that says, you know, like this isn't representative of whatever demographic or location where you are in the world, because it's going to take a lot to train these models, and we are just at the very beginning of it. Yeah.
That's amazing to think of, like, for as much change is occurring and so much available that, you know, we're right at the tip of that iceberg, if you will.
Yeah.
And so much more to come.
Definitely.
Yeah. Now, I know that we can't talk about like new stuff, you know, that's coming, but from Julianne's perspective,
yes.
like what's next? Like what are the big things? What are we going to see in the next year or two, you know, from the world of professional photography, for graphic artists, for typographers? Like what's coming? Like, she's
well,
like,
I know that, and I know that, and I can't do that.
Say that.
I think a lot is going to be coming down the pipes. You know, when you had said like the raising the bar, so now, you know, things are getting easier and easier for people to hit that baseline where, you know, these cameras can get everything in focus and you get a good exposure, and the phones are using computational photography in order to help improve the image. So it is raising the bar. So for me, it's like, it's all about creativity. Like, I'm trying to figure out, okay, what makes, I think when you know yourself, that can be really helpful. So where do I put myself to make myself more creative? What inspires me? What do I need to ignore? What do I need to look into? You know, what tools can I, you know, maybe generative AI, is that a tool I can put in my belt? And then how do I stay ahead of my competition? Mm-hmm. And one of the great things about, I mean, weddings, portraits, events, like I always say, you don't want a picture of a grandma. You want a picture of your grandma, right? You just want a picture of your grandma that maybe doesn't have, you know, a tree growing over her shoulder or something.
Or so straight out of her head.
Or straight out of her head,
yes.
Right, exactly. So I think that there's that aspect that can help us fix those images, and then I don't see it like ruining those careers, because we want pictures of ourselves, like real people, and what we're doing and what we experience.
Yeah.
But the whole, you know, I've seen some of this video that's being done with generative AI, and it's pretty fascinating. I mean, it's very weird when it morphs people and together and puts big costumes on them and is very like science fiction of the future. Yeah. I think that's super interesting. It'll be more interesting to me when I have a little bit more control over it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that'll happen.
Yeah. I mean, to go back and to your point about, you know, you don't want a grandma, you want your grandma. Mm-hmm. You know, and for all the professional photographers that are listening to this, you know, and some are probably terrified and some are very excited, and there's going to be a middle ground too. Like, you want the memory that's attached to that image. Yeah. You know, you cannot have one of the beautiful products that we, you know, sell here without having the session, without having the memory, without having the experience that goes with that. So, you know, AI and what is happening with technology is just a tool, like you said. It's another thing to pull out of your belt to be able to use. How you choose to use it is up to you. Yeah. You know, is it going to be for efficiency? Is it going to be for creativity? Is it going to be so you get to spend more time with your family, like you mentioned, and not be sitting in front of the computer at 2 a.m.? You know, COVID propelled the world into, you know, a much more experiential place where people would invest a lot of money. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm a textbook consumer when it comes to experiences. Like I need to have that story that goes with it, you know, and what you're doing and what Adobe's doing to allow people to take that experience in that session, but then elevate that bar. I mean, it's exciting. It's really
I think
exciting.
It is. I mean, I can see how it can be intimidating and a little overwhelming, because so much is going on. There's so many things changing in so many aspects of our lives. But for me, it's like I can't wait to see what's next.
I know.
I mean, it's going to get better and better. And those things that I like making selections. Oh, there's in the beta of Photoshop right now, there is you can make a selection, like select subject based on the cloud or based on your local device. And I do not know what those engineers did to that, but if you put it to cloud, it is so much better. Like it's so much better. It's incredible. So that's great. I mean, I love the pen tool, but I don't need to, like,
Yeah.
It's not what I really would love to be doing on, Friday night.
Yeah, you'd probably rather be in a helicopter.
I'd much rather be in a
or an
helicopter.
airplane strapped with one little safety belt hanging out the door, photographing all these.
I would.
Yeah, and it's funny, before we jumped on, I asked Julianne how high she was, and then she's like, I have no idea. I was just terrified.
Yeah,
And that's why
pretty
I
much.
can't answer the
Pretty
question. And it's fun, that you're so excited about this because you know more than you're letting on here about things that are coming, and you're so versed into this ecosystem, and to know that you're like, wow, this is going to be cool.
Yeah, what I think will be very interesting and in the future, and you're already seeing this with like the text generative text and everything, is that like if I'm a big company, there's already technology that will allow me to just input all the information from my company, and then when I do searches and stuff, I'm not searching the whole world. I'm just searching all the data in my company. So think of it like onboarding individuals and stuff. You can get all that information super easily. So what is very interesting to me, I'm not really a preset person. Like, I don't usually apply presets to my images. I do it for efficiency, but I don't necessarily. I kind of go in and hone each one the way I want them to look to Anyway, if I could train a machine learning model to take my raw exposure, so there's my before, and then what I do to many of my images, and I could feed it like 2,000 images and say, okay, let's make one for me, do that, and then if I could take that and say, and then this is what I do in Photoshop. And so, automate that stuff, like taking out all those little twigs in my landscape or whatever like that, then that, to me, when it's more personalized to what I do and I'm using my own style, because I don't really have an interest in, I like to learn from other people's styles, and I like to then make them my own. Like, I don't really have any interest of just making something that someone's already done. And that's one thing with generative AI, it's only trained on the past. So it's up to us still to figure out what the next creative thing is in the future.
Right. And then think of the time savings if you were able to do that.
Yeah.
And then it frees you up to do, to raise that bar.
Right. I could still go in, but then I'd be using my own creativity
Right.
to fine tune everything. And that's what, in a way, kind of scares me a little. I mean, composites used to be very difficult to make. They're getting so much easier to make. I'm like, oh, goodness, now everyone can make a composite. I better really, up my game.
I can remember like going by and like erasing people out like that. How many hours did I spend doing that?
Yeah.
I'd be 10 years younger now if I didn't have this power.
So for me, it's kind of inspirational because it does say like, okay, let's go.
Right.
If you want to do this.
So from an educational standpoint, you do a lot of teaching, a lot of instructing. Are you going to be presenting, teaching? Where can people find resources from Julianne Kost for learning?
Oh, I would say probably one of the best places is just my blog, which is jkost.com/blog.
Okay, cool. And like, how far back do all your blogs go, or have you been blogging for eternity?
I've been blogging for a long time, but I have condensed them all, and I'm trying to get rid of anything that's no longer relevant because, as you know, everything changes so quickly.
Yeah.
But like, if you're interested in learning, I just did a whole series on Lightroom Classic. I have another series on Photoshop on LinkedIn. Okay. So that's the LinkedIn Learning, and that's a fundamental course. I think there's 100 videos on that.
Wow.
And
just 100?
Just 100, yeah. The nice thing about that, and if you don't subscribe to LinkedIn Learning, like maybe you're a student, a lot of universities have access to LinkedIn Learning, and so do a lot of public libraries.
Oh, that's a good tip there. And then from resources from Adobe, where do people go to? What are the valuable things that people can go search through Adobe and to enhance their knowledge of what we've been talking about today?
I would say to just search the Adobe blog. It's kind of divided up into different areas, so you can see what's new. There's a lot of great white papers up there. So, like, if you really want to know, like, how does denoise work, or super resolution, or something like that, there's a lot of information that's written by the engineers that's really quite good. And then there's a lot of stuff on marketing too, and
Okay, awesome. And then, completely personal question: when's the next time you're going to be photographing some cool stuff from an airplane?
I don't know.
And where are you going?
That is a good.
I know
question.
you're going to Florida from here, but
yeah, I don't know. I don't have any plans to do it right away. Sometimes it's just very it just happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of fun. That way you don't have time to get scared of the heights.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly. Well, we really appreciate you being here with us today, and the time flew by.
Yes, it did. All right, it was great having a conversation with you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you for printing these. They look so good printed.
Fantastic.
I love them.
Is there anything that we did not cover in my questions in your notes that we need to talk about that do you think people should hear before we kind of make our closing talk here?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Okay.
I would just say, don't be scared of it. Just don't be scared of generative AI or AI. I think we can, as far as the artistic part of it, I think you will figure out where you want it to be in your process. And if you don't want it to be in your process, that's fine too. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One thing that you did not say today that you did say the other day, and I want to make sure that we discuss it, is you said rules are good to know, but they're meant to be broken.
Yeah.
And as people are following along and listening today, understanding that this does not have to be a jump all the way in or all the way out. It can be whatever you want it to be. And if it doesn't work, that's fine. The program is not going to chase you down and make you use it.
No, no, it won't.
And you have the opportunity to break the rules and to see how it feels. And if it enhances your creativity and your productivity and your efficiency in your business, fantastic. If it doesn't, great. It's fine. It's not the big scary thing.
No, I don't. I would agree.
Yeah, for sure.
And it'll be very personal as to how much everybody uses it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again.
Thank
I think
you for
it's
having me.
almost lunchtime. I had threatened Tom that he was going to have to do a solo, but we'll let him skip that this time. And we really appreciate you hanging out with us today. It's been a pleasure to have Julianne Kost with us. Just a reminder, if you do have questions, please put them into the comments and we will do our best to get those questions answered for you. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube, make sure and subscribe to that so you get notified of events coming up. Follow along on Instagram at Whcc Pro, and for all of your product questions, hit up whcc.com. I'm Matt. It's been a pleasure to have you with us today. Thank you again, Julianne.
Thank you.
And we will see you at the next live.